Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is Life, Liberty, and Levin. I have two great guests. Mr. Mark Meckler, how are you?
Good to see you.
Dr. Tom Coburn, how are you?
Great to see you. Great to be with you.
You're two patriots. You come from different backgrounds. You're California, you're Oklahoma. You're a doctor, you served in the House of Representatives, you served in the United States Senate. Before that, you were a businessman, then you decided to become a physician. You've been a lawyer for some time, a businessman also, and a political activist. You helped start the Tea Party Patriots, and now you've decided, you know what, we got to do something about the growth of government, and the nation seems so unmoored from our constitutional system. Dr. Coburn, you're elected to the Senate, and then you said, that's enough. Tell us about that.
Well, Mark, I spent 10 years in the United States Senate following the enumerated powers, what our Constitution laid out for us. And I actually sent letters every year to every senator saying, I'm going to block whatever you do if you don't do that. And that 10 years, I was able to do some positive things, but not near what is necessary. And I came to the conclusion after 10 years that what's wrong with our country isn't going to get fixed by the career politicians in the Senate or the House, because we have abandoned the core principles of the enumerated powers, and we have this ever-expansive government that is limiting our freedom, but also sacrificing the future of our kids because we've mortgaged their future. And so I left looking for another method with which we can cheat history and not be a republic that falls because we didn't continue with the principles, the foundational principles that we had.
What are the issues that you think will cause this republic to fall?
Oh, several. One, the lack of virtue that's been promoted in the public education system. Number two, the debt. Number three, the unfunded liabilities. And number four, the abandonment of the rule of law. And if you go read the history on other republics, we're doing exactly what they did that caused their own collapse. And we're repeating it. And you just had noticed this week that the Treasury's going to borrow another $750 billion more this year than they did last year. At some point in time, somebody's not going to loan us the money. And then the game's up. And then the consequences are terrible for our kids. Republicans
control Congress.
Yeah.
They used to campaign as fiscal conservatives, at least. They would say, well, don't focus on the social issues. Let's at least focus on the financial and fiscal issues. What's happening?
Well, I think that's a natural consequences of career politicians. I mean, if you look at the people who vote against all this stuff, they're not the career politicians. They're the individual citizen legislator who says, that isn't what we're supposed to be here for. You know, one of the things I found really interesting is the oath when you go into the Senate doesn't mention your state. Mentions the U.S. Constitution, mentions our country, do what's in the best interest of the country. And I found that that was in conflict with re-election with many members of the Senate. And that's the other reason I left, is I didn't see a body that was capable of fixing the big problems of our country, because the government has become so ever big that it micromanages. You know, on average, the average state government only gets to decide 40% of the issues of their own money. An unelected bureaucrat in Washington decides it the rest of the time. And that isn't what we fought in for. That isn't what I believe our Constitution or our framers thought. What our framers thought is that we had experiments going on in different states and that there was a limited role for the federal government. And actually, in the clear documents, said everything else is left to the people and to the states. Well, we've abandoned that completely from Washington. We believe Washington, the country believes Washington, the politicians believe Washington, the judges believe Washington should control it all. And that isn't where I came from. That wasn't what I was taught. I don't believe that's what our founders believed. And so we have a solution that will actually solve this great problem.
Mark Meckler, you're an activist, one of the great leaders of the great Tea Party movement. 2010, Democrats are swept out of the House of Representatives. Soon thereafter, Democrats are swept out of the Senate. You figure, okay, now's the time to really get control over spending, the size of government, and so forth. And you see that's not happening. Then you decide to move into another area. Tell us about Convention of States. What is Article 5 of the Constitution all about, and why is it so important that our viewers know about this?
Well, you know, from all that activism, from the big switch in 2010 especially, and realizing that nothing changed, I realized we were attacking the wrong problem. The problem we were attacking was a personnel issue, wrong people in Congress. If you could just put the right people in, the right stuff would happen. Time has shown us that's not the case, right? We know that things haven't changed. We just had this $1.3 trillion supplemental budget, whatever they want to call it. It's just not fiscally responsible. So there had to be another problem. And if you dig in, what you find historically is we've created a structural problem. It's not a personnel issue. We've actually broken the structure of our government. So if you put good people like Tom Coburn in Congress, like Jim DeMint and others, now Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, there's some good people in Congress. They're working in a broken system. They cannot fix what ails the country. The founders gave us a remedy for this. They knew it was coming. In Article 5 of the Constitution, they inserted the second clause, which gives you and me, acting through our state legislatures, the power to call a convention of states for the very purpose of proposing amendments to restrain government tyranny. And sometimes when I say that, people say, how do you know what the purpose was? And we can look back at Madison's notes. What happens is 2 days before the end of convention, September 15th, 1787, you have Colonel George Mason from Virginia stands, addresses the assembly, says something like this: we have a problem with the document we've created. We've given the power to Congress to propose amendments, but not the people. And he asks a question: are we so naive that we believe that a government that becomes a tyranny will ever propose the right kind of amendments to restrain their own tyranny? Madison's notes, really interesting there. They debated everything, right? Not that. His notes say nin com in Latin means no comment, no debate, and unanimously they vote to put this second clause of Article 5 that gives us the power. And important we remember specifically what they intended is the power to restrain a federal government run amok. So that's the purpose of our efforts around Article 5, is to call a convention, get the states together, and have them propose amendments specifically that will serve to restrain federal tyranny.
Isn't it true, Dr. Coburn, that this is what the states used to do? They used to meet, they used to have conventions, not constitutional conventions, conventions of the states, to resolve problems, to address issues. And so this was common practice. So to insert it in the Constitution, as Mark Meckler says, was to counter this notion that only amendments can come from the federal Congress, 2/3 of both houses. And wasn't it Mason who said, what if Congress is oppressive?
Yeah, right.
Then what will the people do? Other than violence, there needs to be a way to address this. So why do you think so many Republicans in state houses and state senates claim to be standing up for the Constitution by opposing the Constitution? That is, by opposing Convention of States and Article 5, which is the second way provided by the framers and the ratifiers to amend the Constitution.
Well, I think there's two reasons to that. You know, you either have fear or courage. And what we see today is a lot of fear in our country. And leadership requires courage to do the right thing. And so you also have a lot of interest groups that are making money off of opposing this and actually siding with the far left progressive that we shouldn't fix our country and limit it. You know, I think there's four main things that allow a republic to survive. Touched on a little bit, but rule of law is really important. That's under stress. Virtue, under stress. There's no question about it. Number 3 is a limited government. We have anything but a limited government. And number 4 is economic freedom. This country led the world for 200 years in economic freedom. We're 17th in the world now. Why is that? That's the tyranny of a large government that interferes with the ability to start, build, and expand a business. And so one of the things you're seeing presently through the elimination of lots of regulation is good economic growth. It's not all based on taxes. It's based on the monkeys getting off business so it actually can create wealth and create jobs. So, you know, I think the number one reason is fear and lack of knowledge. And so hopefully through you and other people and what we're doing around the country is that we can educate people. Here's what our founders thought. You know, this isn't a Johnny-come-lately idea. It's been there. They put it in intentionally so we could have a solution to where we are today. And they knew this would happen because history tells us this is what happens to republics.
Mark Meckler, isn't it true there's 2 ways to amend the Constitution under Article 5? Through Congress, state ratification. Through the states, state ratification. That's really the only difference. But isn't it true today The Supreme Court amends the Constitution. Congress passes statutes, amends the Constitution. The massive bureaucracy. In other words, the process isn't even being followed. And so when you raise one of the processes that actually exist in the Constitution, that's actually a legitimate way to address efforts to act outside the constitutional boundaries.
Yeah, you nailed it. And the founders actually warned us about this, about amending the Constitution bit by bit through the courts, through legislative action. This, Mark, by the way, is why the left opposes this so much, because they've been doing this for over a century. They amend through the courts. And most people don't realize this. They think of the Constitution as that thing they carry in their pocket, right? Or the one in the National Archives, beautiful document. Today, if you order the Constitution from the government printing office, the government publishing office, you can order it, $130 roughly. It is now 2,738 pages. With the supplements, it's over 3,000 pages. It weighs over 10 pounds, contains every Supreme Court case that has ever told us what that beautiful, succinct document means. It's outrageous. So we're living out of this big, fat document. It's not the Constitution that most people think we're living under. That's, for the most part, the left's Constitution. They love that big, fat book because it gives government almost unlimited power.
So what do you say to those who say, I love the Constitution. We'll never do better than the men who gathered in Philadelphia? My answer is, I agree, but we can do better than the men and women who serve on the Supreme Court or who serve in Congress, because it is they who have changed the United States Constitution, and it is we who need to bring it back. Does that make sense?
It does. This is actually a movement to restore the Constitution. And what I usually say to people who ask that question is, as I say, well, which Constitution are you referring to? I mean, we have two in America. We have the one that you and I and all your readers and listeners and viewers love, and that's that pocket Constitution, the one in the National Archives. And then we have the one that's been changed over the last mostly 115 years by the federal courts and the Supreme Court, by actions of the federal government. I love the original, and my goal is to strip away a bunch of those decisions that changed the Constitution, that gave the federal government so much power, that made the citizens smaller, and restore the citizen and the states to their proper place in the balance.
Is it realistic to believe that the entities, the institutions, and the individuals who have created this post-constitutional design will give us back our constitutional design?
Well, you know, I don't care what they believe. What I believe is the American spirit is about liberty and freedom. And if you go talk to individuals, I was in 32 states last year. If you go talk to individuals, they want their freedom. They want to be able to decide. And, you know, as Mark says often, this movement is about making recommendations to the states. There's nothing foundational in this other than making recommendation. But it's really about who gets to decide our own government. And what's happened is no longer do people get to decide. Unelected judges, unelected bureaucrats have decided for us. And so it's about restoring the process. So I think we can. But I think what we have to do is be very clear about what our intent is. Our intent is about restoring liberty, about restoring decision-making at the states, about honoring the vision of our founders that we will decide as people. We give the power to the government. We give it to them. They don't give it to us. We give it to them. And we have the right to maintain and focus on our own freedom and our own movements within our individual states. And that's limited, of course, within the Bill of Rights now, but the Bill of Rights is ignored, as are the enumerated powers. So I think it's ever positive that people can see that if we actually restore the Commerce Clause to what it was intended, then states will have a return of their rights to make decisions for their own individuals, and the individuals in that states can actually control what happens in their state.
When we come back, I want to ask you, is there anything to fear from this process? And what is this process exactly? Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, almost every weeknight you can watch Levin TV by joining us. Go to crtv.com/Mark, crtv.com/Mark, or give us a call at 844-LEVIN-TV, 844-LEVIN-TV. We'd love to have you.